the very first thing I want to go over with you is how to make selections. So what I'd like you to do is go New, under File, go New, Blank File, and we're just going to go with the default Photoshop element size, which is 6 inches by 4 inches. The background content will be white, and it's going to be 300 ppi resolution. That's fine. Just hit OK. And now we have our first document. It comes in this layers panel down here. Everything you do inside of Elements is based on layers, okay? So whenever you bring in an image, even if it's a blank new document like I did, it's always going to come in as a layer. It's always going to say background with an italicized font, and it's always going to be locked. There'll be more on that later when we deal with layers. But for now, this is just the way Elements works. So having created a new document, I'd like to introduce you to your first tool, and I'm going to start with the Rectangular Marquee tool. Now, the way Elements is set up, some tool buttons have several tools attached to them. So if you click and hold on the Rectangular Marquee tool, you'll see that there's an Elliptical Marquee tool underneath it. But for now, we're going to go with the Rectangular Marquee tool. I'd like you to simply click and drag. Now you've created a selection. This is what's known as a selection inside of Elements. And what this specifically means is anything that's inside these marching ants, this dotted line here that's moving, Elements will act on. Anything outside of these marching ants, Elements can't and won't touch. So the whole purpose of making selections is to selectively work on different areas of your image. And having made a selection, with the Marquee tool still selected, I can move it around my file, like so. So if I want to deselect, I go up to the Select menu. Anything pertaining to selections is always going to be up in your Select menu. On a Mac, it's up here. On Windows, it's down right underneath this dark bar. Regardless, you go Select, Deselect. That drops your selection. Okay, so I'm going to make a new selection. At the Marquee tool, which I'm just activating again now, will move your selection. And then if I paint inside the Marquee and then go back to the Marquee tool and move it, I'm moving the selection. If I go Command Z or Control Z to undo, then go grab my Move tool, as you can see, I'm not only moving the selection, but I'm moving all the pixels inside of it. So that's the main distinction between moving with the Marquee tool and moving with the Move tool. Okay, so back to matters at hand here. That's how you make a selection. The most basic selection is the Rectangular Marquee tool selection. I'm going to deselect. I'm going to grab my Rectangular Marquee tool, except this time we're going to hold down the Shift key. Now I make a perfect square. If you want to make a perfect square, hold down your Shift key. If I don't hold down my Shift key, I'll make a rectangle. The minute I press the Shift key, it turns that into a perfect square. Okay, and there you go. There's a perfect square. If I click and hold on my Rectangular Marquee tool to grab the Elliptical Marquee tool, I'm now going to make an ellipse. And the same rules apply, right? I can make an ellipse just like this. If I hold down the Shift key, it'll make a perfect circle. If I don't hold down the Shift key, it'll just make an ellipse. All right? Now, here's where it's going to get a little confusing for you, so just, pay attention here. I'm going to make a selection. If I go over to this bar right here, which is known as the Options bar, the Options bar is a dynamic bar, and it reflects the options for the particular tool that you choose. If I choose the Lasso tool, or let's say the Eraser tool, I have different options up here. If I choose, let's say, the Crop tool, I have different options up here. If I choose the Eyedropper tool, I get different options. If I choose the Hand tool, etc. So this is a dynamic bar which will give me the options for the tool that I choose. In this case, since I've chosen the Elliptical Marquee tool, it's giving me all the options for that. Now, up on the very leftmost part of the options bar are 4 icons. Right now, New Selection is chosen. Right next to it, to its right, is Add to Selection. If I click on that to activate it, notice that my crosshair cursor now has a plus sign in the lower right-hand corner. That means I can add to this. So I can drag outside and go inside the selection to add to it. Not only that, I can create a new shape completely outside the selection, like I'm doing here, and then I can intersect them. But here's the thing that you need to understand. Even though I've now made several different selections, I'll make even more. As far as elements is concerned, this is all one selection. And that's key to understand because selections are going to get very confusing very quickly, and it's important that you understand these basic concepts. So even though we are seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different shapes, this is one selection to elements, and I can prove it to you. If I grab my brush again, and I'm only grabbing a brush for illustration purposes, anything you do inside of elements will only happen inside of selections. But I'm going to grab a brush. I'm going to start outside to show you that once again, can't paint anything. The minute I go inside, I'm now painting. I go outside, inside, right? See what's happening? So as far as elements is concerned, this is one big selection. I can prove it to you another way. If I go to Edit, Fill, Selection, which is under the Edit menu, and I'm going to say use, all right, I'll say use black. We're going to fill it with black. The mode is normal. The opacity is 100%. I'm going to hit OK. Now it filled that single selection with black. There are several shapes, but it's a single selection. All right, I'm going to deselect. And then if I grab my Move tool, you can see that I actually can't do anything. As a matter of fact, I get a dialog box which tells me that because this layer is locked, I can't move anything. So that's pretty much the basics of selections. Whether it's the Marquee tool or the Rectangular tool, you can add to selections, you can subtract from selections. I'm going to go with another blank screen here. And not only can you add to selections, like I said, you can subtract from them. I'm going to grab the Rectangular Marquee tool, make a selection. I'm going to come to my options bar and click on the third icon from the left, which is the Subtract from Selection tool. If you look at my crosshairs, it's got a minus sign by it now. So if I start from the outside and drag in, I'm taking a chunk out of the initial selection. Like so. If I do the inside, I'm actually poking a hole into that selection. So once again, if I go to Edit, Fill Selection, and this time I'll choose a color. Let's go Color. And I'll choose blue, make a nice blue, hit OK, hit OK. As you can see, if I deselect, now I poked a hole in the selection, so this area was deselected. Let me reselect that. So if I grab a brush, and now my foreground color is black, and I paint outside the selection, nothing happens. The minute I go inside, I'm now painting with black, right? So whether you're subtracting or adding to a selection, you're really always only doing it to one selection. Elements perceives this as one selection, okay? I can further complicate matters by going Add to Selection. You have to make sure you go Add to Selection. So I'm going to draw some boxes over here. And you can see that I've still got my original active selection. I've still got marching ants around that painted area. But now I have 3 new areas. Let me just point out, this is a common mistake. If I go back and click on New Selection and then drag, I've deselected everything. And now I have a brand new selection. So you have to be careful. The key to all this is right up here in the options bar. And then the last one on the right is Intersect with selections. So let's say I've got this X. If I drag, it takes the intersection of 2 selections. So let me make a new selection. Let me make the screen blank again, first of all. And now I'm going to go New Selection. And now I'm going to go Intersect Selection. And I'm going to start over here and drag. Now see where this intersection is? When I let go, I've only got where the two selections overlapped. So you're not adding to a selection, you're taking the intersection of both selections to create a brand new selection.